The sound of metal smashing glass echoed through the quiet morning air. "You expect me to believe you're a judge? A black man in this beat-up car?" The officer sneered. "My Bronze Star and Purple Heart didn't matter then. They will today." Justice Marshall Vance awoke at 5:30 a.m., the same time he had risen for the past 45 years, first as a Marine, now as a 65-year-old Supreme Court Justice. His modest home outside Washington, D.C. was simple but immaculate, a reflection of military discipline that never left him. He carefully selected his attire, a tailored charcoal suit that complemented his distinguished salt and pepper hair. In the mirror, he straightened his tie with the same precision he once used to align his Marine Corps uniform. The routine was sacred to him. On his dresser sat two shadow boxes. One contained his Purple Heart, earned when shrapnel tore through his leg during his second tour in Iraq. The other housed his Bronze Star with Combat V for Valor, awarded after he led his unit through an ambush in Afghanistan, saving 17 Marines. Beside them was a photograph of him being sworn into the Supreme Court 5 years ago, achievements that marked his journey from the projects of South Chicago to the highest court in the land. Marshall sipped black coffee as he reviewed case notes for the day. The nation's most complex legal matters awaited his judgment, but first he needed to reach the courthouse. He gathered his judicial robe and briefcase, pausing briefly at the doorway of his late wife's study. Catherine had been gone 3 years now, but he still felt her presence guiding him. Outside, his 2012 Ford Taurus waited in the driveway. It wasn't fancy, Marshall had never been one for luxury, but it was reliable. The only issue was the cracked taillight, damaged last week when a shopping cart hit it in the grocery store parking lot. The light still functioned, but the red plastic cover was visibly fractured. He had scheduled a repair for the weekend. Marshall placed his robe carefully on the back seat, alongside a small wooden box containing his Marine Corps pin, a ritual good luck charm he kept close during important cases. Today's docket included a critical First Amendment case that had divided lower courts. He started the engine, his mind already formulating questions for the attorneys who would appear before him. The car pulled away from his driveway and onto the quiet suburban road. Little did he know this routine morning drive would become anything but ordinary. 20 minutes into his commute, flashing blue lights appeared in Marshall's rearview mirror. He calmly signaled and pulled over, positioning his car properly on the shoulder, safety habits ingrained during his military service. He rolled down the window and waited respectfully, hands visible on the steering wheel. Officer Sloan approached, a stocky white man with a clean-shaven head and mirrored sunglasses that concealed his eyes. His hand rested casually on his holster as he leaned toward the window. "License and registration," he demanded without greeting. "Good morning, officer," Marshall replied with measured courtesy, slowly reaching for his wallet. "May I ask why I've been stopped?" Officer Sloan's eyes narrowed. "Broken taillight. It's a violation." Marshall nodded. "I understand, sir. I have an appointment this weekend to get it fixed. The light is still functional, but the cover was damaged recently." The officer took Marshall's license and registration, examining them with increasing skepticism. His gaze shifted between the documents and Marshall's dignified appearance, then drifted to the judicial robe visible in the back seat. A smirk formed on his lips. "Judge Marshall Vance?" Sloan's voice dripped with disbelief. "Of the Supreme Court?" "Yes, officer. I'm headed to the court for arguments this morning." Officer Sloan's expression hardened. He handed back the documents with obvious contempt. "Right. And I'm the president." His eyes darted to the Marine Corps emblem visible on the wooden box. "Playing dress-up as a Marine too? That's stolen valor, old man." Marshall's jaw tightened slightly, the only visible sign of his rising indignation. "I served 28 years in the Marine Corps, officer. Retired as a colonel." "Listen," Sloan cut him off, voice rising, "I don't care what costume you're wearing or what lies you're telling. You think a black man driving this piece of junk is on the Supreme Court? You people always trying to be something you're not. Marshall remained composed, his military training controlling his response. "Officer Sloan, I've provided proper identification. You can verify my identity with a simple call to your dispatch." "Step out of the vehicle," Sloan ordered, his hand now firmly on his holster. "Now." Marshall complied with deliberate calm, his tall frame unfolding from the car with the distinct bearing of a man accustomed to command. Even at 65, his posture reflected decades of military discipline. Officer Sloan circled him like a predator. "Playing judge in that fancy suit. Disrespecting real Marines with your little souvenirs. Who do you think you're fooling?" Officer Sloan circled the vehicle, his contempt growing with each step. He stopped at the cracked taillight, tapping it with his flashlight. "This isn't just broken, it's dangerous," he declared, though the damage was minor. "But I guess that's what happens when people like you try to pretend you're important. Can't even maintain a proper vehicle." Marshall stood perfectly still, hands visible, employing the same self-control that had served him through firefights and high-stakes diplomatic missions. "Officer, I understand your concern about the light. I'd be happy to show you that it's still functional. There's no need for this approach." Sloan ignored him, peering through the car window at the judicial robe. "Nice costume. Where'd you get it?" "Halloween store." His eyes fell on the wooden box with the Marine Corps emblem. "And this? You know impersonating military personnel is a crime, right?" "Those are my actual service decorations, officer," Marshall replied evenly. "Purple Heart and Bronze Star with Combat V. I earned them in Iraq and Afghanistan." Something in Sloan snapped. Perhaps it was Marshall's composure, or the possibility that he might be wrong. Without warning, he unclipped his baton. "Let's see what your fancy judge car looks like now," he growled. The baton came down hard on the intact taillight, shattering it completely. Glass shards scattered across the pavement. Not satisfied, Sloan moved to the damaged taillight and smashed it further, then proceeded to methodically break both brake lights. The destruction was swift and deliberate. Each impact echoed Marshall's memories of mortar fire, yet he remained still, documenting every action with a warrior's observational skills. "That's better," Sloan said, returning his baton to his belt. "Now your car matches your fake story." He leaned in close. "Get this piece of junk fixed before you pretend to be someone important again." With that, Officer Sloan returned to his patrol car and drove away, leaving Justice Marshall Vance standing beside his vandalized vehicle, glass crunching beneath his polished shoes. As the patrol car disappeared around the bend, Marshall Vance surveyed the damage with the clinical assessment of a man who had seen far worse. For lights destroyed, glass scattered across the asphalt, and a clear case of abuse of power motivated by racial prejudice. The morning sun caught the shards of red plastic, reminiscent of the glass-strewn streets he'd patrolled in Fallujah. This battlefield was different, but the injustice just as real. Marshall reached for his phone with steady hands. He wasn't calling for help or to vent frustration. This was now a matter of principle, the same principles he defended in combat and from the bench. He dialed his judicial assistant. "Rebecca, this is Justice Vance. I've been delayed. Officer Derek Sloan of the County Police Department stopped me and deliberately destroyed my vehicle's taillights." His voice remained measured, professional. "Please inform Chief Justice Williams that I'll be late for arguments. Also, connect me with the County Police Commissioner." He provided his exact location and a detailed description of the incident with military precision, times, badge numbers, specific statements. The training that had once helped him file combat reports now served to document this domestic injustice. "And Rebecca," he added, "please have the court police retrieve the dashcam footage from Officer Sloan's vehicle immediately. Use whatever judicial authority necessary." Marshall ended the call and stood at parade rest beside his damaged car, his decision already made. This wasn't just about a personal affront, it was about the oath he'd sworn twice in his life, to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Within 15 minutes, a black SUV with federal government plates pulled alongside Marshall's damaged car. Two Supreme Court police officers emerged, their expressions shifting from professional neutrality to barely concealed shock as they surveyed the destruction. "Justice Vance," the senior officer said, "are you all right, sir?" "I'm unharmed, Thompson," Marshall replied, his composure unbroken. "Just delayed." During the ride to the court, Marshall sat silently, mentally preparing for the day ahead. The incident had not shaken his focus. Marines and judges alike learned to compartmentalize. Upon arriving at the Supreme Court building, Marshall walked up the marble steps with the same purposeful stride he'd maintained for decades, briefcase in one hand, judicial robe draped over his arm. Only those who knew him well might notice the slight tightening around his eyes, the single tell from his poker-playing days at Camp Lejeune. Inside, Chief Justice Williams waited in the robing room, concern evident on his face. "Marshall, I've heard what happened. Absolutely outrageous. Do you need to recuse yourself from today's arguments?" Marshall donned his robe with practiced movements. "With respect, Chief, I didn't miss arguments after being hit by shrapnel in Ramadi. I won't miss them because of one bigoted officer." Williams nodded, understanding the iron will behind the calm exterior. Court Administrator Patricia Reynolds entered with urgent news. "Justice Vance, the County Police Commissioner is on the line, and the dash camera footage has been secured." "The arguments first," Marshall replied, adjusting his sleeve cuffs. "Justice doesn't wait." He entered the courtroom with 7 of his colleagues, his military bearing unmistakable as he took his seat on the bench. To the attorneys presenting arguments that morning, Justice Vance seemed as imperturbable as ever, his questions as precise and incisive as any day. Only the Chief Justice knew that beneath that judicial robe beat the heart of a Marine preparing for battle. Following court adjournment, Justice Vance met with the County Police Commissioner, District Attorney, and FBI Civil Rights Division representatives in his chambers. The dashcam footage played on his monitor, providing irrefutable evidence of Officer Sloan's misconduct. "This isn't just property damage," the District Attorney said, breaking the heavy silence after the video ended. "This is a hate crime, abuse of power, and destruction of federal property, considering your position." The police commissioner, a former Army Ranger, looked physically ill. "Justice Vance, as a fellow veteran, I'm disgusted and ashamed. Officer Sloan will be terminated immediately." Marshall raised his hand slightly, the same gesture he'd used to quiet anxious lieutenants before operations. "Commissioner, I appreciate your reaction, but I want proper procedures followed. No shortcuts. This isn't about vengeance." The FBI representative nodded. "We've pulled Officer Sloan's record. There's a pattern of complaints from minority drivers, but nothing stuck. Until now." "Justice Vance," the district attorney interjected, "given your position, we could expedite charges. And feed the narrative that I'm receiving special treatment." Marshall shook his head. "Proceed as you would for any citizen whose rights were violated. The law should protect everyone equally, or it protects none of us." Over the next 3 weeks, the investigation progressed methodically. Officer Sloan's history revealed 6 previous complaints of racial profiling and excessive force, all dismissed. Witnesses came forward, including a delivery driver who had captured video of the incident from a distance. The grand jury indictment was handed down promptly, felony charges for destruction of property, civil rights violations, and official misconduct. Throughout the process, Justice Vance continued his court duties without comment to the press, exemplifying the same stoic professionalism that had guided him through combat zones. Officer Sloan's defense team moved aggressively, filing motions to suppress the dashcam evidence, claiming it had been improperly obtained through Marshall's undue influence. They demanded the case be moved to another jurisdiction, arguing that no local jury could be impartial given the victim's prominence. Their boldest move came when they filed a complaint with the Judicial Ethics Committee, arguing that Justice Vance was using his position to orchestrate a persecution of Officer Sloan and should recuse himself from any court cases involving police powers during the pending litigation. The motions landed on Judge Amelia Richardson's desk in federal court. A respected jurist known for her impartiality, she called both parties for a hearing. In the courtroom, Sloan's attorney presented his arguments with theatrical indignation. "Your Honor, Justice Vance has weaponized his considerable influence to ensure my client cannot receive fair treatment. This case should be dismissed." When her turn came, the federal prosecutor spoke calmly. "Your Honor, Justice Vance has actually insisted on standard procedures throughout. He's refused special treatment and has not used his position to influence this case. The evidence speaks for itself. Judge Richardson's ruling was unequivocal, the motions are denied. The dashcam evidence was obtained through proper channels. Venue remains unchanged. And regarding Justice Vance's conduct, I find it exemplary. He has maintained the dignity of his office while seeking justice through appropriate legal avenues, just as any citizen has the right to do." Officer Sloan, sitting behind his attorney, visibly paled as the reality of his situation became clear. The trial began 6 months after the incident. The federal courthouse was packed with journalists, legal observers, and citizens drawn by the unprecedented case. Officer Derek Sloan sat at the defense table, his previously confident demeanor diminished by the gravity of his situation. His attorney, William Frost, maintained a professional facade despite the challenging case before him. Justice Marshall Vance entered as the first witness for the prosecution, causing a silent ripple through the courtroom. His appearance was striking, not in his familiar judicial robes, but in a conservative suit with a small Marine Corps pin on his lapel. He moved with measured dignity to the witness stand. After being sworn in, he faced the prosecutor, United States Attorney Sarah Chin. "Justice Vance, please tell the court about your encounter with Officer Sloan on March 15, she began. Marshall recounted the events with military precision, exact times, verbatim quotes, and detailed descriptions of actions taken. His testimony was neither emotional nor vindictive, but factual and clear. The courtroom listened in stunned silence as he described the destruction of his vehicle and the racial slurs with the same even tone he might use to analyze constitutional precedent. During cross-examination, defense attorney Frost attempted to undermine Marshall's credibility. "Justice Vance, isn't it true that your position makes you accustomed to deference? Perhaps you were offended by Officer Sloan's failure to recognize you?" Marshall's response was measured. "Counsel, I've served in war zones where my rank meant nothing against enemy fire. I've never expected special treatment because of my positions. What I do expect is the same treatment any citizen deserves, respect for their rights under law." Frost pressed on. "But you used your influence to expedite this case, didn't you?" "No, sir," Marshall replied. "I specifically requested standard procedures be followed. The record will confirm this." The prosecution's case continued with methodical efficiency. The dashcam video played in court, showing Officer Sloan's escalating hostility and destruction of property. The jury watched as Marshall stood calmly throughout the encounter, his military bearing evident even in civilian clothes. Forensic experts testified about the extent of damage to the vehicle, approximately $2,800 in repairs. The police department's internal affairs investigator presented Sloan's troubling history of complaints from minority drivers. Perhaps most damaging was testimony from Sloan's former partner, who reluctantly admitted that Sloan frequently expressed racist views and targeted black drivers, especially those he perceived as trying to be important. When Officer Sloan finally took the stand in his own defense, his testimony contradicted the video evidence. He claimed he felt threatened by Marshall's imposing presence and disrespectful attitude, despite the video showing Marshall's consistent courtesy. During closing arguments, defense attorney Frost attempted to portray Sloan as an overworked officer who had a momentary lapse in judgment. Prosecutor Chen's closing was powerful in its simplicity. Officer Sloan didn't see a Supreme Court justice that morning. He didn't see a decorated Marine colonel who served this country for nearly 3 decades. He didn't even see a citizen whose rights he was sworn to protect. He saw only the color of Justice Vance's skin, and that led him to commit these crimes. The evidence is unambiguous. Justice demands a guilty verdict. As the jury filed out to deliberate, Marshall sat quietly in the gallery, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning with their verdict. The courtroom fell silent as Officer Sloan stood to face judgment. On the count of willful deprivation of rights under color of law, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of destruction of property, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of official misconduct, we find the defendant guilty. Sloan's shoulders slumped visibly with each pronouncement. The judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. When the day arrived, Marshall attended alone. The judge's sentence was firm: 3 years in federal prison, restitution for the property damage, and a permanent ban from law enforcement work. As Sloan was led away, his eyes briefly met Marshall's. In that moment, there was no triumph in the justice's gaze, only the solemn acknowledgement that the system had worked as intended. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for a statement. Marshall spoke briefly. "Today isn't about me. It's about upholding a principle I defended both as a Marine and as a jurist, that no one is above the law, and everyone deserves equal protection under it." Officer Sloan's actions reflected a betrayal of his oath, similar to how I would betray mine if I used my position for personal vengeance. I take no pleasure in his punishment, only affirmation that our system, though imperfect, can still deliver justice when we demand it. In the aftermath, the county police department instituted comprehensive reforms in training and accountability. Marshall received hundreds of letters from veterans and citizens who saw in his response a model of dignity in the face of injustice. 1 year later, Justice Marshall Vance sat in his chambers, reviewing briefs for an upcoming case. On his desk stood a new edition, a framed letter from a young black law student who had been inspired by Marshall's handling of the incident to pursue a career in justice reform. The episode had faded from headlines, but its impact remained. Law enforcement agencies nationwide had adopted the Vance Protocols for accountability and bias prevention. The Supreme Court had recently accepted a case addressing qualified immunity, with Marshall's experience providing a powerful context for the discussion. His car had long since been repaired, but Marshall had requested that one piece be preserved, a fragment of the shattered taillight, mounted beside his Purple Heart. Both represented wounds received in service to his country, one abroad and one at home. For Marshall, the incident reinforced what combat had taught him decades earlier, that justice, like freedom, requires eternal vigilance and occasional sacrifice. His dual oaths, as a Marine and as a justice, had never seemed more aligned than when facing prejudice with dignity and ensuring accountability without vengeance. True strength, he reflected, was not in breaking things, but in building them, including a more perfect justice system. What would you have done in Justice Vance's position? His military discipline enabled him to respond with controlled dignity rather than anger. Do you think his approach was more effective than an emotional response would have been? Share your thoughts in the comments and show respect for others who faced similar prejudice while serving our country.